Hello everyone, I am Bhumi Bagohil and today I will deal with Stockholm Syndrome and how it's presented in literature and movies. These are my academic information. So let us start with understanding Stockholm Syndrome. What is it? So it is when the hostage as in someone who is kidnapped, we can say, experience a powerful positive feeling towards their captor. This phrase was coined by psychiatrist Niels Bijort, and another famous psychiatrist, Frank Ockberg, gives this definition of Stockholm Syndrome. He says that in Stockholm Syndrome, there is a sudden, terrifying capture. The hostage is stunned, shocked, and often certain that he or she will die. The hostage then becomes like an infant. So we see that this happens when the hostage is completely dependent on their captor, and this is a psychological coping mechanism they develop. So, this is when victims view their captors in positive light, sympathize with them, and sometimes develop romantic attachments. So, this is the basic idea of Stockholm Syndrome. Now, let us see how it's presented. So, first, let us see Pamela or Virtue Rewarded. It is an epistolary novel by Samuel Richardson. The protagonist is Pamela Andrews, a 15-year-old maid who is abused by her employer, Mr. B. He harasses her physically and mentally, and when she refuses to have relationship with him, Mr. B kidnaps her. But what is more shocking than all of this is that at the end, Pamela forgives him and gets married to him. So, this is the absurd portrayal, and modern day readers can identify the problematic theme of this. So, we have an answer to why this happened, and that is Stockholm Syndrome. As says in her blog, as readers of post psychology perspective, it is close to impossible to ignore the case of Stockholm Syndrome Richardson's presented. So here we see the absurd portrayal of relationship, a Stockholm Syndrome example that makes readers uncomfortable. The next one is Beauty and the Beast. We saw in Pamela the absurdity of Stockholm Syndrome. Here we see the romanticizing of Stockholm Syndrome. It is a very famous fairy tale, and the most famous version is written by French novelist Jean Marie Le Prince de Beaumont. And after that, it has been adapted into movies and TV shows several times. So in this, the basic plot is that Belle is imprisoned by Beast, but she eventually falls in love with him. And we see that here over time, it is a fairy tale of our childhood, and I'm sure all of us know it. But it does not make us as uncomfortable as Pamela made us. And the reason for that is because over time, it is portrayed as a fairy tale, and as Lee says in her paper, the original beauty of Beauty and the Beast did suffer from Stockholm Syndrome. She developed feelings for the Beast under stress, alone, and unsupported, rather than through genuine connection. However, as the story has been altered for modern audiences, elements of Stockholm Syndrome have all but vanished. So, in here, we see the romanticizing of it, and it has been done through time and through modern adaptations. So it is not very problematic, but it is portrayed as a fairy tale. Then we have Highway, a Bollywood film directed by Imtiaz Ali. So here also we have a similar theme. Veera Tripathi is kidnapped for money and she falls in love with her captor. But there is a twist here, and that is Veera's struggle with her family and her troubled past. So she was abused in her family as well by relatives, and she was feeling she had no one to genuinely care for her. And that is why when she was kidnapped and she finds um, someone caring for her for the first time, so their bond is justifiable, you can say, and you understand the relationship and why it happened. As Amanda says, she tasted independence while she was being held at ransom, but she feels imprisoned in her own home. And we also see that Veera and Mahabir, that is the kidnapper, they bond over troubled childhood. So here we see a believable portrayal of relationship and justifying of Stockholm Syndrome. There are several movies and TV shows and books that portray this. Here are a few examples of movies. The Crying Game by Neil Jordan, Buffalo 66 by Vincent Gallo, Ravan by Mani Ratnam, and Berlin Syndrome by Kate Shortland. Here are some books that present Stockholm Syndrome: Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, 6 Days of the Corner by James Grady, Captive by A.J. Granger, and Stolen by Lucy Christopher. So, to conclude, we saw that Stockholm Syndrome, what is Stockholm Syndrome, and how it is presented by different creators in different manner. But we should also remember the impact of certain themes and ideas have on us, because our movies, our literature is very impactful in our life. And sometimes people get false encouragement by watching something. They accept a false message, so creators should be mindful of that. If you remember, there was recently an incident where a man in Australia misbehaved with a woman, and then he pleaded to the court that he did this because he was badly influenced by Bollywood movies. So, in this way, there is impact. So, we should be mindful of that. And also, people should be aware of such topics, because Stockholm Syndrome does not only limit itself to kidnapping and everything. As Ockberg further says, the significance of Stockholm Syndrome goes beyond rare instances of kidnapping and hostage taking. It explains aspects of attachment to battering husband and incestuous father. It is not conscious, willful behavior to avoid punishment. It is regression and recovery of a powerful, primitive feeling toward the giver of life. So we see that so many times in our society we see that people suffer from domestic violence and they still do not do anything. They keep living with them, and we wonder why is that. So that is because they are completely dependent on them, and they develop this, you could say, attachment to them and positive feelings towards them. So it is also important to have awareness of such topics. Here are my few references, and thank you. Now for any questions.
Bhumi, my question is for you. In the movie Highway, Stockholm Syndrome portrait, does it reflect contemporary societal dynamics?
You could say, I mean, I personally thought that Highway was one of a kind, like, example, because if you see, she was abused at home, and then she willingly accepted to live with her kidnapper. And I don't think that would happen in our society, because even if most of the times, even if they nowadays there is such kind of awareness, so if people uh, face abuses at their home, they would report it to the proper authorities, and they would take proper actions towards them. And yeah, so I personally think it was one of a kind example. Any other questions?
Okay, my question is, why is it called Stockholm Syndrome?
Okay, so as you might know, Stockholm is a city in Sweden, and this is where the first incident happened. So in 1973, I think there was a bank robbery, and in that, two criminal had kept a few people hostage for 2 3 days, and when they were released, they showed a very, you can say, interesting thing. They did not complain about them, their captors, and in fact they were very empathetic towards them, and they were scared that the authorities will harass them. So this kind of started this, that they were sympathizing with their captor. And this was the first instance, so that is why it's called Stockholm Syndrome.